Yeah.
Thank you for joining XROM, which is India's first AR/VR focused podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Parth Shah, who's a virtual production supervisor at Greenrain Studios and a Visual Effects Society secretary for India chapter. Before joining Greenrain, Parth was instrumental in setting up Centroid, India's Mumbai studio, and supervised the studio's performance capture, virtual production, and Previs services. Parth Shah was also the virtual production supervisor for setting up India's first LED volume in 2020, which was in collaboration with Cineom, Greenrain, Centroid, Liminal, and Famous Studios. So, Parth, really happy to have you on the show. Appreciate you taking time being part of this podcast. Why don't we directly jump into virtual production and your role at Greenrain Studio? So maybe you can start with what is virtual production, how does it help, and your works at Greenrain Studios.
Sure. Thank you for inviting. And I think it's an honor to be part of this podcast. I see a lot of great lineups you have in the speaker session. So to introduce quickly about myself, and I think most of them you covered. So I'm acting as a virtual production supervisor at Greenrain and working across lots of projects across Asia. That's largely India, Japan, Korea that we're working upon, and probably in the coming months announcing those projects as well as what initiatives we've been working upon. So I think hopefully that news should be out. I mean, we have been working hard on that initiative from past 1.5 year or so. So just looking forward to that. Uh, I mean, virtual production to I mean it's an area which is, I mean, virtual production has been happening for many years because it consists of a lot of components. To put it very in a simpler way, it's more like a physical production in a virtual world. I would say it in a one liner. It's a physical production that happens in a virtual world, and it it comprises of lots of things. So it contains your world capture, visualizations, performance capture. Now in-camera VFX is something that's coming up a lot. And back in my previous role, which was Centroid, I mean, they have been doing motion capture and virtual camera for many years now. Even before I joined them, they have been performing that. So, I mean, virtual camera and everything has been part of it. But I think at this stage, uh, it's getting more structurized. Everything is getting a proper name. Jargons are coming together. The components are coming together, and it's getting more structured. It's a great tool for filmmakers in this generation, I would say.
Right. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, the entire filmmaking process, right from creating to distribution is being upended with, not just virtual production, with virtual reality, and I think all of these technology, I think, is going to play a huge role in storytelling, right from artificial intelligence to virtual reality to virtual production. So there's this great shift that we are seeing. But obviously there are a lot of these traditional filmmakers, traditional content creators, who don't really understand this. Obviously you mentioned about world capture, virtual capture, in-camera VFX, performance capture. I try and simplify to this to my traditional. I mean, those traditional filmmakers who really do not know what virtual production is, and possibly maybe you can give some use cases that, okay, this is where your entire journey of creating content can be upended.
The virtual production consists of lots of, it's like you're going to a vegetable vendor, and there, there's a cart of different vegetables. Similar, so when you go to a virtual production studio, they have a various services. So there's visualization, world capture, performance capture, and each of them starts from a hierarchy. Ideally it would start from something as called as world capture. World capture is nothing but creating assets into 3D. Now there are multiple ways of doing it. Initially we used to do modeling, 3D modeling in Maya and other softwares, which has been happening from past many years. There are more better technologies and solutions out right now, which is called photogrammetry or lidar scanning. What it does is basically it scans a real object and converts that into 3D. It does require special equipment to do such, but the benefit is that you get an accurate model, a 3D model, as well as the textures and everything, deformations are accurate. Now largely we do lidar scanning for locations, eventually, and to build up. So if it's a real life location, if there's a Mumbai city we need to build, modeling that would take ages for us, if it's for a small. So, I mean, and it's faster doing it LiDAR scan. So generally, we have been doing it for projects where we are restoring the entire physical sets into the digital world. So that also has the VFX in the later pipeline. So that's the stage of world capture when I mentioned about. So yeah, digitizing everything that's out there. Once the assets are digitized, then comes the character, where there's photogrammetry as well. So photogrammetry is basically, again, doing a digitization, digital version of your character. So we scan these characters and convert them into 3D characters, because now we have a world, and now we have a character. Then comes performance capture. So what performance capture is doing, even though we have a world and a character which is just in standard T pose, performance capture is a tool where we capture the actor's performance and use that as an animation to drive our CG characters. Uh, Again, it's performance capture has been there in the industry, I think, since 1970. Initially it was used in medical for gait analysis, and that was motion capture. Then performance capture kept on developing, and I think now performance capture is basically when you capture the facial performance, body performance, and finger all together within audio. That's what performance capture stands. So after world capture comes performance capture, where we are capturing these characters to drive them animation. The entire purpose of doing this is for a process called visualization. So initially, what used to happen is, the directors or the filmmakers used to have storyboards. They used to draw storyboards, but that was restricting them on a 2D frame. So that was on a piece of a paper where they used to draw, and definitely it was helpful, from many years, because that process has been successful. So many years it has been helpful. What it wasn't helping them is to visualize how a light would react, or if it's an animating shot, how would the camera flow, if that's an actual good shot or not. That's when the Previs came. Previs stands for, it's a short form for pre-visualization. Pre-visualization is basically, to put it in a very simpler way, it's an animated video. It's an animated version of your film. So it's like creating an animated movie for your script, and then focusing on that, how the storyline would work upon. Now, the benefit of this was it was helping filmmaker understand, okay, what the animation is. How is the framing? Is the framing good, or do I need to change my framing? So that's what the previous was largely being used, helpful for. And then again, under visualization, it's a big umbrella. But I'll just talk about just few things. So that's previous. Then there is Stuntvis. Stuntvis is similar to stunt visualization. It's largely beneficial for, I would say, visualizing your stunt actions. I mean, there are great examples that's been done for Mad Max, out there, by Guy Narish. He was a stunt director as well, and he has started his own virtual production studio as well right now. And other than Stuntvis is Techvis. Techvis is technical visualization. So once your previs is done, when the director is final, he says, okay, this is what my storyline is going to be. The editing is finished so that we know, okay, this is what the shots are, this is what the timeline is. Once the previs is finalized, then we move on to a stage called Techvis. And to be honest, I stress upon Techvis a lot in whatever projects I'm in part of, because it's a very important stage. What TechVis lets you do is, as the word stands, it's technical visualization. So, for example, if there's a shot that's been selected in Previs, TechVis will basically break down that shot and understand how it has to be shot on stage. So, how would you execute on a film stage if there's a particular dolly in that's happening? What grip would you use? What lens would you be shooting it on? If it's shot against an LED, or if it's shot against a green screen, or if it's a live location, all of these decisions are taken in TechVis. And it's, to be honest, the entire purpose of virtual production, I would say, the cost effective, where people focus, it's a cost effective solution. It's basically, if you do a good tech quiz, it's going to definitely help you ahead, because that's when you're going to save cost. You're going to understand how much of equipments and everything would be required as well. So tech quiz is an important step. Post tech quiz, after the tech quiz is done, we move on to principal production. So so until here it was all pre-production. So all of the stage which I mentioned, world capture, performance capture, visualization, so previous Techvis stunt, all of this happens before we even go on to the actual shooting flow. So it's all part of a pre-production. On production stage, that's when it's either decided, okay, during Techvis, okay, did we decide to go ahead with an LED, or did we decide to go ahead with a chroma, or is it a live location? So all of these decisions are taken, all of these decisions are taken care of. If it's shot against a chroma or an LED, that's when two things comes in. That is in camera VFX and Simulcam. Simulcam is to put it very simpler in a very simple way. It's basically tracking your camera. If you have a green screen, it will composite the background in real time, not the final output, but the DOP can visualize, okay, what's going to come. So they are not just shooting on a blind chroma. And if there is any AR character, say an avatar, avatar characters, they can visualize them on the real world. So it's more like an AR itself, AI toolkit, but now on a film camera. So that's what the Simulcam stands for. And the other in-camera VFX tool, which is out there, I think, which is getting a lot popular nowadays, is shooting against an LED screen. Uh, and that's beneficial because it acts as a two thing. You get your final output in camera, as well as it acts as a light source and creates an ambient light and reflection for a surface. And I think the last piece, after all of this is done, is in the editorial stage comes Postvis. And I would say that's the last stage of uh, virtual production, where Postvis is basically if you have a plate shot, say, against a chroma, or even a normal plate. What Postvis does is basically it will add a rough VFX, a very drafted VFX, not a final pixel, but very rough VFX on that CG background. So it will key out. They'll just put elements, what the CG scene is going to be. This is useful because it will tell the VFX house how much is the VFX going to be, and they can and they can give an approximate and a good estimate of the bidding. When it comes on bidding, it's they can give a right bidding as well based upon the post ways as well. So these are all the stages. It's a big umbrella, as I said, of virtual production. I try to compress it in, I mean, as short as possible, but yeah, it's a big area which has to be covered upon on yeah.
So far, traditional filmmakers had to use just a camera, possibly the sound team, and the actors. Now, all of them are disappearing. And you're saying that everything can be digitized, and can be done in a closed room, closed studio environment. Your final SFX can also be rendered. Everything right from the pre to the post production can be done, and from your Previs to your Postvis, Stuntvis, Techvis. So these are obviously loaded words, but I think every content creator or production house needs to pay attention to this transition or shift which is happening, because it's creating accessibility and democratizing content creation, simultaneously, which has been happening somehow because of the role of technology. Today I think artificial intelligence, machine learning, these generative AI is playing such a huge role in what could be the future of storytelling. And somehow, I mean, as a content creator, as a production house, if you are not paying attention to these things, you will be nowhere, because things are moving so very fast. So you were also part of India's first virtual production volume studio here in India. Would you like to talk about that first experiment, setting up this thing? You mentioned that it's cost effective. Yes, it's cost effective in the long run, but in the short run, it's superbly expensive, because these LED volumes, these curved walls, they are very expensive. What talk to us about the journey? Putting up that virtual studio in collaboration with Famous Studios and Centroid. What was the learnings from there? How did you guys manage to put that thing together? And while the studio was there, what was some of the experiences that you built leveraging that studio?
Sure, definitely. I can definitely speak about that. But just coming to the previous point, which was about I mean, I totally agree. It becomes too technical when it when they're first introduced to these technologies. So there's also a thing called virtual scouting, which is basically, you can virtual scout either wearing a VR headset or an AR, where you can basically go move around the 3D scene and visualize. So what we do is, whenever the DOP or a filmmaker comes in, we don't use the jargons. We would put it in a way, say, this is the virtual recce, so because they're familiar with the word recce now. We have a virtual camera as well. We wouldn't say it's a virtual camera. We could say it's an actual camera. So and we try to mount those virtual camera on an actual film grips. So when they look at the grip, it's like, that's a really, equipment which they handle. So it's, yeah, we try to make it as simple as possible. uh, though this jargons are meant for our technical people out there, but yeah, we try to make it as simple as possible for them, and slowly introduce this jargons to them, because eventually it helps us in the long run, for the technical team to perform better on stage, because we understand what they're exactly asking for. uh, Now, talking about the virtual production stage that we had in, and this was post-pandemic, immediately, I think the first wave, after the first wave, we wanted to do this thing before the first wave itself. It was me and Priyan Parab. He's a good friend of mine, from Cineom. Again, that, so we met, and I was running Centroid at that time in India. And we actually did one open house in, I think, February 2020, and that was largely for Simulcam demo. So where we had an open house, we invited people, and we wanted to do an LED, but it was way expensive at that moment. And we thought to give it some time, because we didn't have a sufficient budget to put up an actual LED stage at that point of time. And then at March, the COVID came in, the world stopped at that moment. But then I think in the June, India had opened down. It was relaxed. There was some relaxation in the COVID, and we met together, and we again got introduced to two new friends as well, one from Liminal and one from Greenrain. So we four of us sat down, and we just thought, let's do this. Everyone will has some specialities. Let's come in with that, and then put up a stage together. Because it's time, at least someone starts in India at that moment. So it was that decision. So we had a good partners in that case, and everyone who came in with their specialities. Uh, and we also borrowed some LED panels, and decided, what shape and everything has to be. So I think we had the panel for around a month, and in that month, day in and night, we were just experimenting a lot on panel and setting up the understanding what is the pipeline, what is the limitation. We were trying to push that boundary over there. And at the end of the 1 month, we had an open house where we invited people from industry. Everyone from industry came down, visited we had an Epic also coming down and checking out the space and everything. So that was a successful show. But the purpose of putting up that pop-up lab, what we had, is to see what is the limitation of this. And we did get a lot of learnings. So, for example, I'm definitely happy to share those learnings. So, I mean, one of the learnings which we definitely got is, you cannot shoot a very bright daylight scene in an LED stage. We understood what is the safe distance to keep an actor away from the screen. We understood what is the frame rate limitations on shooting on that screen. So there were a lot of technical knowledge also that we acquired, and as well as creative. So that was a good learning experience for us, and we came up with 7 different scenarios. We decided to shoot 7 different scenes, from beach to jungle to I think it was a gymnastic or a gym. So there were like 7 different scenes we picked up in different lighting scenarios, and we decided to see what we can do. I mean, we were limited on resources. We didn't have much of a I would say a production designer or an art director on board. It was just four of us friends, who were heading these companies, and they were all of us were doing great work, and we were doing ourselves. So even the actors were, ourselves. In some of the shots, it's me or Karan or someone, acting out in the scene, but we were just trying to beat the boundary. I think one of the interesting inventions that we were trying to do at that time, and I'm not sure if anyone has done at that point, was we clubbed motion capture with LED. So what happened in end screen is there's an LED background. In front, there's a real person walking around the space, and in front of that, there's a CG monster who is acting. So it's basically clubbing all the technologies together, and someone in a VR headset who is moving that sofa around him. So he's landing in the right spot. So it was a fun experiment zone for us, and great learning as well, I would say. But and I think that is something that has helped all four of us to move ahead in this industry and see where, and then that's why we're able to guide people a lot better at this stage and even set up the pipeline as well. So, but yeah, I mean, the times are possible, but the short answer, what we have learned is not every scene is meant to be shot against LED. I know it's tempting, but that's a very important thing which is out there, and that's always what we convey to filmmakers when they say that it's a virtual production film. We want to shoot against LED. My suggestion as a virtual production supervisor would be, what the script is. Does the actually shot requires that? If it doesn't, please don't do it, because again, it comes with the restrictions. You can't do an action scene on an LED wall. So yes, it's such thing.
Right, yeah, yeah. Sometimes, when you have new technology, then everybody wants to just do it just for the heck of it. So yes, I mean,
Right.
kudos to you and the entire team, because I mean, yes, that was, I think, what the first of its kind here in India, the LED volume, and I'm sure there's so much that you guys would have had learned, and now you guys are leveraging it for real world use cases and working with these big production houses. Talk to me about some of the use cases, some of the works that you have built, which and the problems that you have solved, how it can relate to a traditional filmmaking, and how and why he should leverage that, and how it has it has helped. So maybe if you could talk about some of those, that it'll be really nice.
Definitely. So I mean, most some of the projects are still as yet to be released. So I would, without naming those projects, I can definitely share what the solutions were of these problems. Uh, so I mean, generally, what used to happen in India, and this was I think last year, is for one of the productions, the client didn't have the budget, but but what I realized is the LED is the solution for that, because it's an aircraft shot. It's from a cockpit perspective, and yeah, LED is a good source for reflection. Now in India, keying is cheaper. It's cheap to do keying out because it's cost effective. It's not going to cost them a lot, and it's easier to do it in tools nowadays. What is difficult is giving the actual reflection of that scene and projecting it back on a plate that was shot against chroma. So that sometimes becomes trickier. It's not impossible, it becomes trickier. It used to be a difficult thing. What we ended up doing is we had the mock-up of the plane, and the entire back wall, instead of having the back wall as LED, we instead had a chroma over there, and the entire LED surface that we had was projected in front of the plane. And when the director now started filming, so it's basically a plane. I'm shooting at the plane, and behind the camera is the entire LED wall that's throwing all the content on the plane. Now, this was helpful in a way where they didn't had to build up the entire Mandalorian size stage, because it's a massive budget. Second thing, they were familiar with shooting against chroma, so they weren't scared of something new coming in out in the way, and they weren't locking down on the framing as well at that stage. So that was another benefit, and they were getting a really, really great reflections of the entire sky, everything on the plane surface, the wings, the cockpit, the driver, the helmet, everything was coming in camera itself. And which was, I remember the reaction which they had after looking at that shot on the monitor. uh, they were very happy. They and they felt, and even the actor was happy because now they could see themselves. They could see the content playing out in front of them, and they could react to that as well. So it was great benefit for actor as well as for a director and cinematographer, because now they were getting the content in camera itself. It's giving those powers back to them rather than saying, okay, we'll fix it in the post. That has gone. But I think then the VFX house was also, were happy because they weren't worried about now creating the, I would say, the texture projection on the plane back. So I think that was one. I mean, there are tons of examples out there. I think another example was also for one of the shows. It's a mythological movie that's going to come out in Bollywood. But what we try to do is the the director wanted to build, show the story happening in the veranda of an old house, which is set inside in the jungle. Uh, Now the production designer had only 15 days to build up that set, as well as what I mean. It was a bit of a chaos at that stage. Before I entered the project, and then when I got on board on that project, we realized that they didn't have to build an actual set. They don't have to build the entire house. That's going to cost them around 8 to 7 CR. It's not real actually, and as well as the stage that they were going to shoot on, the size is not sufficient to build the actual house as well over there. So in all of this thing, they weren't aware about. So that's when we got them familiar with the virtual camera, Techvis, all of these solutions in place. When they realized, okay, probably I don't need to build my entire house. So we went through the entire cycle of this. We did the world capture, we created the set in 3D, we did the virtual scouting, we did performance capture for the actor blocking. We gave the director, sorry, the DOP, actual virtual camera, and they were framing their shot. Uh, After that, we got the art director in VR headset where they could see around their scene and they can understand what is the scale of my scene. If the materials and everything is looking good or not. So they could understand those things. And then we did a tech quiz. After tech quiz, I mean, they just had to build two staircase and a veranda in the sitting area in the center. That's all. And everything else was chroma. I think they ended up saving around 65% of the cost what they were estimating earlier, and that's a huge saving. What they were thinking before. So that's the benefit of doing that. I mean, one of the recent project, again, because the project is still yet to be released under the production, uh, but I can definitely say the figure which they were able to say. What they were initially planning to build up a set was going to cost them 9 crores. After doing this entire exercise, the entire set now has been built in the cost of 2 crores. So they ended up saving 7 crores, though the VFX budget went up a bit, but that was 10%. So initially, I think it was costing them 60 lakhs. Now it is costing them 70 lakhs itself. So I think that's the magic of this. It's cost effective. It's helping them basically plan their movie very effectively. So the money is getting spent where it's needed to be spent. Yeah.
Right. But stay over here only because the work's over here. Talk a little bit more about the Bollywood studios, the ad agencies, the small production houses. Talk about some use cases where you have seen and you're like really excited about the movement in the entire virtual production space over here in India.
I think one of the very another exciting studios, and this is very I'm happy to share is there's a DOP in Hyderabad called Manoj. I mean, he has done great movies. He's one of the recent movie which was successful by him was called Radhesham as well. Where he was the DOP. So he has been experimenting in this space as well, and I think we all started at the same time in COVID. But he has been leveraging this technology in Hyderabad and Chennai as well a lot, and I think recently they shot a music video along with Mr. Srinivas Mohan, who is also a very celebrated VFX supervisor in India. He was also a VFX supervisor for Triple R as well. So I mean, together I think they shot one song as well, music video in Chennai, and that was beautiful. I mean, I when I saw that it's amazing the quality of work that's coming out from India, and I think in media moms in Delhi has also set up some stage. So I think people across India are now coming up with pop-up stages. There are I mean I'm sure I mean I personally I'm building 3 stages. So I know that there's so much of thing that's happening over here in India now. And I think in the span of a year or two, there's going to be a massive boom in the industry. And I think this is going to be because I think Annapurna is on 1st of October. Annapurna is also launching their virtual production stage. So it's just I think everyone from every part of India there's availability of the stage. Uh, and this is going back to what 2020 was for me. The problem was the reason it was expensive for filmmakers over here was because there was no ready stage for them to come and shoot. What they had to do, they had to first pay the rent of the property as well as the rent of hiring this equipments, technicians, and then putting up together. So that was a big cost that adds to their if it's an ad film which is for a 1 day shoot, it's a huge budget for them. Whereas if there are these ready stages which are available in India, it becomes easier and just another medium or just another floor for these production houses to go shoot and then move out in a day one. So I think that's something which is going to be really helpful. and I see a lot of content, in the coming years from everywhere across the India, using this technology, leveraging this technology.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Some exciting things you spoke about Annapurna,
Yeah.
Media Monks. Yeah, I think in another couple of years, maybe, this would be more and more accessible, and the entire the way I think how you create content is going to be upended, right from your pre to the post journey. You mentioned about gaming engines. Now these gaming engines are scaring out the traditional studios, who use traditional offline and online editing softwares, because here they are building photorealistic content. So how is that playing up, and what would be your advice to those production houses and agencies? Should they be paying more attention to this? And if somebody is interested, where and how do they start?
Right. So I think, it totally depends on what look they're trying to achieve, the treatment of the film. Because to be honest, even though Unreal and Unity are advancing day by day, to be honest, at this stage, it's not going to beat a Redshift or that kind of renderer. If it's a product visual. So there's space for everything. There's a market for each of the softwares out there. The modeling. Some of the projects we have been working on, the modeling still happens in Maya. The other texturing still happens in Substance, and probably the FX definitely happens in Houdini, because that's the Unreal is still coming out there. So there's still this other DCC tools that's going to be there, which is going to be a supported tool for this game engines. I think where game engines are more helpful in the production, if that product is meant for, say, I've been doing animated shows, like a lot of these animated shows which are coming out right now, where the characters are live driven. This is where it could be useful for, where they want to churn out large amount of content. But I think that's where the game engines are very helpful, because then you cut down on your rendering time. So that it depends on what the final treatment is going to be like. Uh, but I think it's still there's still some time for these game engines to reach at a level where say Arnold or any Redshift renderers are currently doing. There's still some gap over there, and but yeah, I think I can be proven wrong as well in a year or so, because there's advancements happening so fast that, like, a person can only imagine about that. So I believe, but yeah, my advice for these production houses would be, not to get scared from these game engines, but to probably just add that as a tool to their existing pipeline. Because what has happened right now, and I think NVIDIA has also released, and which we have been testing in our pipeline as well, is called Omniverse, NVIDIA Omniverse. What Omniverse does is basically it connects your any DCC tool. So it can be Maya to Unreal, Unreal to Substance, and it creates a bridge between them. So it's not necessary that a person has to learn Unreal Engine to fully create any content out there. They can still create the content in Maya, have an Omniverse or live link, and then they can send their content into Unreal just for rendering out from Unreal Engine. So it's definitely not gonna, I would say, replace Maya or any other software. It's just adding a tool, I would say, which lets you do quicker rendering, real-time rendering, I would say. That's the benefit of Unreal Engine. And not replacing what the other DCC does.
Right. I think every tool will have its own role to play, but yes, there's that other side which you kind of mentioned. The way technology is growing and it's creating things. Who could have thought that we could have got it photorealistic content? And what would that do in another possibly 5-10 years? The evolution, would we require actors? So there's these all of these conversations going on, and it's a very interesting space to be. So I always feel that, obviously, like you mentioned, not to get scared, but try and be a lifelong learner. Try and pick on these small things. Reach out to people, because right now, the social media world is full of these content creators. Ian Hubert, Matt Workman doing some awesome stuff, and you reach out to them, and they're more than happy to kind of help you. And there are people in India who's doing some amazing thing. Epic, their team is doing some amazing thing. So my last question to you, Parth, would you kind of like summarize like 2 or 3 really pointers where virtual production really can upend traditional filmmaking, and all traditional filmmaking should look at those two three things. And what's your roadmap? Paint a picture of how do you see this yourself and Greenrain virtual production in the next 5 to 10 years?
For me, I think there's a lot happening, and I'm just looking forward for the official announcements of what I've been working on from past 1.5 year. Uh, it's yeah, it's something big that's gonna come because I've been designing the entire architect of that pipeline for that particular stage, and it's a stage where every virtual production technician or a supervisor dreams about. So it has technologies ranging probably from everything, so from inertial motion capture to optical motion capture to all the simulcams, LED. There is every pipeline. There's a visualization pipeline. So it's encompasses all the components, even the photogrammetry and lidar. So yeah, it's everything packaged in one beautiful space out there. So yeah, hopefully in coming months that should be something that's going to launch. And again, hoping the projects that have been got an opportunity to work across Asia would be launched as well. So yeah, it's an exciting space where we are at, and I think it's looking good. I think down 2 years, I'm quite happy with the amount of projects and the work that's been happening around. Very excited as well, and yeah, looking forward also to what content creators are doing across India as well, and what's going to happen over here. Because yeah, it's now I don't think there's any limitations that's coming. I think there are the contents, even again with metaverse coming in, with lot of I think recently Airtel launched their Metaplex. There's so many things that's coming up right now. I can just only imagine, what could be happening in the coming future.
Yeah, some crazy things happening.
Yes,
Metaverse, Web 3.0, your
yes,
photogrammetry, lidar, your virtual production and volumetric capture. I
yes,
think all of these are now, I think, converging and binding. Once it binds, I think we'll transition from that Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, and that creator
yes,
economy that we all talk about very seamlessly. I think because so far the content has been TD, I mean in 2D, but we are transitioning from that 2D world into a 3D world, and the demand is gonna be the growth is going to be humongous, because all content, I think, is gonna move from 2D to 3D. And I think the studio that you talking about, I mean, wish you the very best, looking forward for it, because finally I think there are so many cool things happening over here. And so as a
yes,
content creator, you don't need to go out to west to shoot. You could shoot everything in an Indian studio over here with possibly the same virtual background as
right.
the west. So exciting space, Parth. Really wish you the very
Yeah.
best. I think you want to say something.
Yes, I was gonna say, I mean, the 2 to 3 pointers as well, like what you were talking about, that about watching production. I think one thing which every person should also definitely consider, even when they're doing virtual production, even if it's a shooting against LED or shooting against chroma or anything, I think the most important step for them is to do two things, that is Previs and a Techvis. I think if they are thorough and if they're given a great amount of time to these two things, uh, I don't think they're gonna ever fall scared of getting onto an LED stage, because that's the two things that's going to answer them how the film is going to be shot. And even when I'm doing any projects right now, I always focus is if there's a good amount of time that's given to this, because it's eventually going to save them tons of money out there, and also the planning becomes good. The better the planning, the better the execution out there. So that's one thing which I should always focus. And I think one thing was also which I'm very excited about is where AI is going towards. Like, there are two things in AI that was I was always imagining. Initially, I was thinking, okay, how would you create an image from an AI? And now there are tons of options out there which creates it from AI. Then I was thinking, okay, that's just limiting to a 2D image. What would happen if it has to be a motion capture? And then there is Moo.ai, which has come out. So it's basically you upload a video to them, or there's Plus. There's so many other websites that just upload a video to them, and it creates a markerless motion capture video for you out there. So I think, yeah, it's great to see where things are heading towards, and how AI is fastening this process. Earlier, it used to be a long tedious process of imagining how the motion capture would happen. So yeah, I think it's just crazy, at what speed this evolutions are happening out there.
Right. Crazy thing. So I mean, my only thing is to all those content creator is pay attention to technology. You mentioned, with AI, Dolly 2 to Google's Imagen is doing text to images, and there's these generative adversarial networks doing some crazy deepfakes and videos, generative AI, procedural wall generation. There's some crazy things happening. So yes, but I think you need to pay attention and I think nothing can stop a content creator to create awesome content. So on that note, Parth, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the
Thank
podcast. And
you.
to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you, Parth. Really appreciate this.
Thank you so much.